I want to start today by asking you to do something. If you're driving, maybe don't do this literally, but for everyone else, just for a second, close your eyes. We're going to do a thought experiment, a proper mental time travel exercise.
I like these. It's one of my favorite ways to contextualize history. It strips away all the abstractions and makes it real.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's set the scene. We're using the classic Rip Van Winkle mechanism. You fall asleep for a very, very long time. Let's start with scenario A.
Okay, I'm ready. Set the stage for scenario A.
All right. You are a Spanish peasant. The year is 81,000. It's the height of the Middle Ages. Your days are spent working the land. You can smell the manure. You hear the church bells. You fall asleep under an olive tree, and you don't wake up for 500 years.
500 years? That's a massive chunk of time. I mean, entire empires have risen and fallen in that span.
They have. So you wake up. It's the year 1500. This is the era of Christopher Columbus, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria. They're bobbing in a harbor somewhere nearby. You walk into town, and the big question is, how confused are you?
Logically, you'd think you'd be terrified.
Yeah, right.
Completely lost. But the reality is probably, well, it's a bit underwhelming.
That's what the sources suggest. You wake up, and sure, the dialect of Spanish has probably shifted a bit. The clothes are a little different, the cut of the tunics maybe. But the world itself feels the same.
It's fundamentally the same.
You see horses. You see oxen pulling plows that look just like the one you use. You see a king's crest on a banner. You see a priest holding a cross.
The core technology hasn't changed. The social structure is identical. The speed of information, which is the speed of a horse, hasn't changed one bit. The energy sources are the same. Human muscle, animal muscle, wood, wind.
You could probably walk into a tavern, order a drink, and find work as a farmhand within an hour. The baseline reality of being a human being in 81,000 versus 1500 was, well, it was basically a flat line.
It was a stagnant world. I mean, not that things didn't happen. Of course, wars happened, plagues happened. But the capacity of the human species, what we were able to do, remained pretty much constant.
Okay, now let's flip the switch. Scenario B. This is where it gets truly disorienting.
Let's take one of those sailors from Columbus's time.
Exactly. Yeah. Imagine a sailor on the Santa Maria. It's 1500. He's tough. He's probably superstitious. He knows the stars. He falls asleep in the hold of the ship. And he sleeps for the exact same amount of time, 500 years.
So he wakes up now, today.
He wakes up to the sound of an iPhone alarm. He opens his eyes. He's not on a wooden ship. Maybe he's in a climate-controlled museum or a modern hospital bed. He stumbles outside. He hears a sonic boom from a jet fighter ripping across the sky. He sees a skyscraper made of glass and steel that seems to touch the clouds.
He sees cars, metal boxes moving at 70 miles an hour with no horses.
He is completely paralyzed. He doesn't just not understand the technology. He doesn't understand the world.
The source material puts it perfectly. It says he would find himself in a world strange beyond comprehension. It's not just that he doesn't know how to use a microwave. It's that he can't comprehend the basic physics of his new reality.
He might genuinely ask, am I dead? Is this heaven? Is this hell? Because those are his only frames of reference for something so utterly alien.
And that contrast, that chasm between the peasant who wakes up and is basically fine and the sailor who wakes up and has a complete psychotic break, that is the story of the scientific revolution.
It really puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
Right.
We tend to think of history as this slow, gradual slope upward. We invented fire, then the wheel, then the sword, then the gun. Just a steady, predictable climb.
But it's not a slope. It's a hockey stick. It's a graph that is flat for thousands and thousands of years, and then around 1500, something breaks. The line goes vertical. In the last 500 years, human power didn't just grow. It exploded.
I really want to dwell on the numbers here for a moment, because they are, frankly, difficult to wrap your head around. We hear stats all the time, but when you stack these ones up, it paints a picture of almost a different species.
Let's start with the most basic one, population. In 1500, the entire human population of planet Earth was about 500 million people. That's everybody. Europe, Asia, the Americas, Africa. 500 million.
That's smaller than the current population of the European Union, just to put that in context.
Today. We are pushing past 7 billion, heading for 8. That is a 14-fold increase. But that's just biology. That's just head count. Look at what those people can do. Look at the economy.
This was the stat that made me just stop and reread the page. Global production.
Right. So if you took the value of every single good and service produced by every human in the year 1500, all the crops, all the swords, the pottery, the songs, everything, and you adjusted it for today's money, you'd get about $250 billion.
Which, sounds like a lot of money until you hear the other number.
Today, the annual global production is somewhere in the neighborhood of $60 trillion. That isn't double or triple or even 10 times. That is a 240-fold increase in what we can make and do.
And to fuel all of that making and doing, we need energy. This is the third pillar of this explosion.
In 1500, humanity as a whole consumed roughly 13 trillion calories of energy per day. And we mean calories pretty literally here. It was mostly food for human and animal muscles, wood for fires, and a little bit of wind for sails. That was the entire energy budget for the species.
And today?
Today, it's 1,500 trillion calories a day, a 115-fold increase. We are just burning through energy on a scale that it's planetary.
So we're not just the same humans with better toys. We are operating on a scale that a person from 1500 simply couldn't process. We are, in a very real sense, titans compared to them.
There's a fantastic analogy in the source material to help visualize this power gap, because the numbers are abstract, but battleships are very concrete.
Yes, the battleship analogy. It's terrifying, but I love it as a visual.
Okay, so imagine a single modern battleship. Not even a futuristic spaceship, just a standard Aegis-class destroyer from a modern navy. We transport it back in time to the Caribbean in 1492.
So you have Columbus's little fleet, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria made of wood, powered by wind, armed with these tiny cannons that are basically iron tubes that lob a rock. And then this steel leviathan appears on the horizon.
The outcome wouldn't even be a battle. It would be an execution, a magic trick. The modern ship could destroy Columbus's entire fleet from 20 miles away using radar-guided missiles before the Spanish sailors even saw them on the horizon.
And if they did get close, their little cannonballs would just bounce off the steel hull like pebbles.
The source says the modern ship could sink the combined navies of every great world power of that time, the Spanish, the Ottomans, the Chinese treasure fleet, without sustaining a single scratch.
It would be like a god descending to Earth.
And this power gap extends beyond war. Think about logistics. The great merchant fleets of the past, struggling against storms, carrying spices and silk. A handful of modern massive container ships, maybe 5 of them, could carry the cargo of the entire world's merchant fleets from 1500.
Or information. A modern laptop can store every word of every book in every medieval library across Europe, and you'd still have room for a few seasons of your favorite TV show.
This is the key takeaway for listeners here. The scientific revolution wasn't just a change in knowledge, it was a fundamental break in the continuity of the human experience. Before the 16th century, we were confined to the surface of the earth, confined to the speed of a horse, confined to the limits of our own eyes.
And then the milestones start hitting. And they hit so fast.
Take circumnavigation. In 1522, Magellan's expedition limped back to Spain, having circumnavigated the globe. It was this unbelievable feat of endurance and courage. It took 3 years. Magellan died. Most of the crew died. It was basically a suicide mission that happened to succeed.
And today, a wealthy person can buy a ticket on a commercial flight and circle the globe in 48 hours, safely, eating a hot meal and watching a movie the whole time.
Or look at something even more profound, the biosphere itself. For 4 billion years, life on Earth has been trapped here. Gravity is a harsh jailer. Not a single organism, not a bacteria, not a pterodactyl, not a Neanderthal, ever managed to leave the atmosphere. The sky was a hard limit.
The sky was the realm of the gods, of angels.
Exactly. And then, on July 20, 1969, we broke out of jail. Humans landed on the moon. Think about that. That wasn't just a historical event like a war or a coronation. That was an evolutionary event, a cosmic event. We broke the biological boundary of our planet.
But with that godlike power comes the other side of the coin, the dark side. The source points to a specific date, July 16, 1945, Alamogordo, New Mexico.
The Trinity test, the detonation of the first atomic bomb.
And the source calls this the end of history moment. It sounds incredibly grim.
It is grim, but it's also accurate. Before that moment, humans could change history. We could burn cities, topple empires, commit genocide, but we couldn't end the human story. We just didn't have the capacity to wipe ourselves out completely.
After 1945, we did. We acquired the power to hit the off switch on civilization.
So this is the landscape we're diving into today, this incredible, terrifying, bewildering jump. We've moved from a world of stagnation to a world of godlike power, both creative and destructive. The mission of this deep dive is to figure out why.
Right. Why us? Why then? Why didn't the Romans invent the atomic bomb? Why didn't the great Chinese dynasties of the Song or Ming land on the moon?
Yeah.
How did we transition from a mindset of preserving old knowledge to suddenly acquiring these massive new powers?
And the answer is so surprising. It's so counterintuitive because it doesn't start with a discovery. It starts with an admission. It starts with the scientific revolution's single greatest innovation, the discovery of ignorance.
This is such a paradoxical idea, isn't it? To learn more, we first had to admit that we knew basically nothing.
Precisely. Let's really dig into the pre-modern mindset. If you lived in Europe in 1300, or in the Islamic world, or in China or India, the prevailing worldview was that the Golden Age was in the past.
The ancients knew everything. That was the vibe.
That was the core assumption. Everything important, everything worth knowing about the world, about God, about justice, about nature, was already known. It was written down. It belonged to the great gods, or the wise ancients, or the prophets.
So your sources of truth were the scriptures, the Bible, the Quran, the Vedas, or the great philosophical texts like the works of Plato and Aristotle.
Right, and so if you were a scholar in the Middle Ages, your job wasn't to go out and discover new things. Your job was to dig into the old texts and understand them better. You looked backward for truth, not forward. You were a historian of knowledge, not a creator of it.
The implication being, if the Bible doesn't mention it, and if Aristotle didn't write about it, then it simply can't be that important.
Exactly. And we can really understand this by breaking down the pre-modern view of ignorance into two specific types. This helps explain why science stalled for so long.
Okay, let's hear them. What's type 1?
Type 1 is individual ignorance. This is simple. It means I personally do not know the answer. Say I'm a peasant and I want to know the origin of the world. I don't know it. But my assumption is that the knowledge exists somewhere. The priest knows. The village elder knows. The Pope definitely knows. The problem is with me, with my lack of education, not with the collective knowledge of humanity.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. It's the I haven't read the manual problem. The manual exists, I just don't have access to it.
Right, but type 2 is the really interesting one. It's collective ignorance of the unimportant.
This is the spiderweb example from the book, right?
Yes, it's a great example. Suppose you're a curious person in the year 1200, and you want to know how spiders weave their webs. The actual mechanics of it. You ask the priest says, I don't know. You go to the monastery library and check the Bible. No mention of spider silk mechanics. You check the preserved works of Aristotle. Nothing.
So the conclusion isn't, wow, here's a mystery we should investigate.
No. The conclusion is, well, God didn't put it in the Bible and Aristotle didn't write about it, so it must be trivial. If this knowledge was important for your salvation or for living a good life, the ancient authorities would have told you. Since they didn't, studying spiderwebs is a complete waste of time. It's irrelevant trivia.
So you have a civilization where asking new questions is actively discouraged because it implies that the ancient sacred texts are incomplete.
Exactly. It implies the Golden Age missed something, that God left something out, and that's heresy. And then the scientific revolution kicks down the door with one Latin word. Ignoramus.
Which means we do not know.
But it's a much more aggressive and profound statement than that. It's not, I do not know. It's we, collectively, as a species, do not know the answers to the most important questions.
That is a massive, massive shift in collective ego.
It's a humiliation, in a way. It's an admission of failure. Modern science openly admits that we don't know how a brain produces consciousness. We don't know what caused the Big Bang or what came before it. We don't know how life started from non-living matter.
And the key difference is that when a modern scientist says, I don't know, it's not the end of the conversation. It's the beginning. It's followed up with, but I'm going to find out.
Correct. And nothing is off limits. This is the truly radical part. No theory is sacred. In the pre-modern world, you couldn't question the Bible or the Quran without being branded a heretic. In the modern scientific world, everything is contestable. If you find evidence that contradicts Newton or Einstein, you don't burn the evidence, you publish it. And if you're right, you win a Nobel Prize for disproving the old guard.
This creates an incredibly dynamic system. Knowledge becomes flexible. It evolves and self-corrects.
But, and this is a huge but that the source brings up, this dynamism creates a massive problem for society.
The stability problem.
Right. Think about it. Pre-modern societies were held together by absolute, unquestionable truths. The king is divinely appointed by God. The laws in this book were given to us by the Creator. These myths, these stories, they created social order. If you suddenly say, hey, we don't actually know anything for sure, and all our myths are probably just stories, How do you prevent society from collapsing into chaos?
If nothing is true, then why should I obey the laws? Why shouldn't I just do whatever I want?
Exactly. The source argues that to solve this conundrum, the modern world has had to do something well, a bit sneaky. We've maintained social order by relying on unscientific methods to fill the void left by the death of absolute religious truth.
Okay, can you give me an example of one of these unscientific methods?
Well, looking at the last century or so, we see two main strategies emerge. The first is totalitarianism.
You're talking about regimes like Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union.
Exactly. They didn't embrace ignorance. They did the opposite. They claimed to have discovered absolute scientific truths. The Nazis claimed their racism was a proven fact of biology. The communists claimed Marx had discovered the iron laws of history, which were as certain as physics. They tried to force science to act like a religion, to be an absolute, unquestionable dogma.
Which, to put it mildly, ended catastrophically.
To put it very mildly, the other option, which is the one most of us live under today, is liberal humanism.
Which feels a lot safer and, nicer.
It is, but we have to be honest about its foundations. We organize our modern liberal societies around the idea of human rights, the idea that every human being has inherent value, liberty, and certain inalienable rights.
Which sounds great. I'm a big fan of human rights.
We all are. It's a wonderful system. But if you ask a biologist, a purely scientific observer, to cut open a human being and find the rights, they won't find them. They'll find a heart, lungs, DNA, hormones. They won't find a liberty gene or a dignity molecule.
So you're saying human rights is a story we tell ourselves?
It's an incredibly useful, beautiful, and stabilizing story, but it is not a scientific fact in the same way that gravity is a scientific fact. It's a dogma. So we hold our society together by agreeing to believe in a non-scientific dogma while simultaneously using science to build our technology and medicine. It's a grand compromise.
We let science run the hospitals and the engineering departments, but we still let myths and stories run the courts and the parliaments.
Precisely. And once we admitted our ignorance in the physical realm, we realized we needed a new language to explore it. We had to stop telling stories about nature and start measuring it.
This brings us to the second pillar of the revolution, the language of science. Or, more specifically, the move from storytelling to mathematics.
This is such a profound shift in how the human brain processes the world. For most of history, what passed for science was largely qualitative. It was about stories, narratives.
The source mentions Manichaeism as an example.
Yes, the ancient dualist religion. They viewed the entire universe as a great cosmic battleground between a good god and an evil god. It's a very compelling narrative. Why is there suffering in the world? Because the forces of evil are fighting the forces of good. But you can't use that story to build a bridge. You can't calculate good minus evil equals the load-bearing capacity of this beam.
Right. You can't predict the trajectory of a cannonball using the concept of righteousness or sin.
Exactly. And then Isaac Newton enters the stage, 1687. He publishes the Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy.
The title alone just signals the entire shift, doesn't it?
It does. Newton looked at the chaos of the universe, falling apples, orbiting moons, the ebb and flow of tides, and he didn't write a poem about them. He didn't create a myth. He reduced the entire movement of the cosmos to 3 simple, elegant mathematical laws.
F equals ma. It's something we all learn in high school, but we forget how revolutionary it was.
And the beauty of it was the predictability. Newton showed the world that, as Galileo said, the book of nature is written in the language of mathematics. If you have the right measurements and the right equations, you can predict the future. You can tell me exactly where Mars will be in 100 years.
This obsession with measurement and mathematics didn't just stay in physics, though.
Yeah.
This is where the story gets really human, I think. It started bleeding into everyday life, even into things that seemed completely random and unknowable, like death.
Ah, the Scottish widows. This is one of my favorite historical anecdotes because it's so incredibly, well, dry on the surface, but so revolutionary underneath.
Set the scene for us.
Okay, it's 1744, Scotland. We have 2 Presbyterian clergymen, Alexander Webster and Robert Wallace. They have a very practical, very charitable goal. They want to set up a pension fund for the widows and orphans of other dead clergymen.
A noble cause, but a potential financial nightmare.
A total nightmare. Because to make a pension fund work, you need to know how much money to collect from the living priests. If you ask for too little, the fund goes bankrupt in a few years, and the widows starve. If you ask for too much, the priests can't afford to join, and the fund fails before it starts.
You essentially need to know the future. You need to know how many priests are going to die next year and the year after that.
Now, in the pre-modern world, how would you approach this problem? You'd pray, you'd look for divine signs, you'd say God will provide, or you'd look at scripture for guidance on charity.
But Webster and Wallace do something radically different. They don't call the bishop. They call a math professor.
They contact Colin Maclaurin, a professor of mathematics at the University of Edinburgh, and they decide to use a new, cutting-edge and kind of weird concept, the law of large numbers.
Can you explain that for us?
The idea, which was being developed by people like Jacob Bernoulli, is that while I cannot predict if you personally will die next year, that's totally random, I can predict with stunning accuracy how many people in a large group, say 10,000 people, will die next year. The individual is a mystery. The group is a predictable pattern.
So they needed data. They needed to turn priests into statistics.
They got actuarial tables from Edmund Halley, yes, the comic guy, who had analyzed birth and death records in the city of Breslau, Germany. And they started crunching the numbers. They collected data on how many ministers there were, at what age they typically died, how many were married, and how many years their widows usually survived them.
I just have this image of these two guys in wigs sitting by candlelight, scribbling calculations, trying to turn the tragedy of death into a mathematical formula.
And here's the punchline. This is what's so amazing. Based on all their math, they predicted that by the year 1765, the Widows' Fund would have a total accumulated capital of 58,348.
Okay, a very specific number. 58,348 pack.
When the year 1765 actually arrived, they went and checked the bank account. The actual total is 58,347.
They were off by £1.
1 pound out of almost 60,000.
That's basically witchcraft.
It's statistics. But to a person from the Middle Ages, it would look like prophecy. They predicted the future with near-perfect accuracy, not by talking to a spirit, but by analyzing data. And that fund, by the way, became Scottish Widows, one of the largest pension and insurance companies in the world. It's still around. It manages roughly $100 billion in assets today.
And this success, this way of thinking, it completely changed everything about education.
Absolutely. In the medieval university, you studied the trivium and quadrivium logic, rhetoric, grammar, theology. Math was a side subject, sort of a curiosity.
Today, it's the absolute foundation of everything.
Even in the so-called soft sciences. If you go to university today to study psychology, literally the study of the human soul, you might think you'll be reading Freud and Jung and analyzing dreams, but what's the first class they make you take? It's statistical methods in psychological research. You cannot understand the human mind in the modern world without understanding standard deviation and regression analysis.
Because we don't trust stories anymore. We trust data.
We trust that the underlying structure of reality is mathematical and therefore predictable.
Okay, so we have the crucial admission of ignorance. We have the powerful new tool of mathematics. But we still need a motive. Why do all this work? Why build the labs and run the numbers? This brings us to the third pillar, the idea that knowledge is power.
Enter Francis Bacon. It's 1620. He publishes a book called The New Instrument.
And Bacon is the one who gave us that famous phrase, knowledge is power.
But I feel like we use it as a cliche today without really thinking about what he meant by it. He was doing something very radical. He was redefining the very test of what knowledge is. For centuries, the test of knowledge was, is it true? Does it align with the Bible? Does it align with Aristotle's logic?
Meaning, is it theoretically correct? Does it fit the established system?
Right. But Bacon came along and said, no. The real test of knowledge is not truth, because we can never be 100% sure of the truth. The real test is utility. Does this knowledge empower us to do new things? Can we use it to build a better bridge, to cure a disease, to grow more wheat?
If you can't use it, it's not real knowledge, it's just trivia.
Exactly. A theory that allows you to create a new technology or a new capability is knowledge. A theory that just sits on a page and sounds elegant is useless. This is why we sometimes have a hard time connecting science and technology in our heads when we look back at history. We assume they were always the same thing.
Right, we have this idea that the Romans were great engineers, so they must have been great scientists.
But they weren't. And this is a crucial distinction. In the pre-modern world, the people who invented things, better carts, stronger plows, horse stirrups, were usually uneducated craftsmen, carpenters, blacksmiths. They learned through tinkering and trial and error.
They weren't sitting in a lab reading treatises on physics.
Not at all. And the scholars at the universities, they were debating theology and logic. They looked down on manual labor. The ruler of a kingdom didn't give money to the university to invent a better canon. He gave money to the university to write philosophical justifications for his rule.
The source uses a really sharp military comparison to show this disconnect. It compares a Roman general to Napoleon.
This is a great visualization of that stagnation we talked about at the beginning. So imagine Scipio Aemilianus, the Roman general who destroyed Carthage in the 2nd century BC.
Okay, Scipio. Tough guy. Leader of the Roman legions.
Now imagine we teleport him 2,000 years into the future to the time of Napoleon, so around 1800.
That's a massive jump, 2 full millennia.
And we put Scipio in charge of a Napoleonic army. The question is, how does he do?
You'd think he'd be completely lost. The technology is so different.
But would he be? He'd look at the muskets and say, okay, these are like weird, noisy bows and arrows. They're slow to load. They're inaccurate. He'd look at the cannons and say, okay, these are basically just powerful catapults. The core tactics, marching in formation, cavalry charges, logistics, and supply lines were almost identical to what he knew. Scipio could probably understand that battlefield in a few days and lead that army pretty effectively.
2,000 years of history, and the art of war hadn't fundamentally changed.
Now do the next jump. Take Napoleon, the greatest military mind of his era, and teleport him just 200 years into the future, to today. Put him in command of a modern army, or even better, have his Grande Armée fight a single, modern armored brigade.
It's not even a contest, it's a slaughter.
Napoleon would be obliterated before he even understood what was happening. He'd see his men being killed by enemies he couldn't see from miles away. He'd see helicopters and jets. He'd see tanks that his cannon fire just bounces off of. He would see radios coordinating movements instantly across the battlefield. The technological gap between Napoleon and today is infinitely wider than the gap between a Stone Age chieftain and Napoleon.
And that gap is the result of what we call the military-industrial scientific complex.
Yes. That gap was created when we finally married science to technology, with Bacon's idea of utility as the efficient. And sadly, war was the wedding planner.
It really kicked into high gear in World War I, didn't it?
That was the turning point. WWI was a deadlock. Trenches. Mud, millions dying for a few yards of land neither side could move. So both sides turned to their scientists and essentially said, save us, invent something to break this deadlock.
And the scientists delivered. Boy, did they deliver.
They delivered hell on earth. Poison gas, tanks, fighter planes, more efficient machine guns, submarines.
And by World War II, science wasn't just helping out. It was deciding the winner.
Completely. The entire war became a race between laboratories. You had the Germans pouring resources into V-2 rockets, hoping for a wonder weapon to save them. You had the British cracking the Enigma code at Bletchley Park. And you had the Americans with the Manhattan Project.
The atomic bomb again. The ultimate expression of knowledge is power.
Think about the decision President Truman had to make. He didn't drop the bomb because he had a deep understanding of nuclear physics. He dropped it because his generals and scientists came to him and said, this gadget will save lives. Our calculations show that a conventional invasion of Japan will cost 1 million American lives and many more Japanese lives. If we drop this, the war ends tomorrow.
It was a brutal utilitarian calculation. It was Francis Bacon's philosophy in its most absolute violent form.
And we haven't stopped since. Today, defense departments are among the biggest funders of scientific research in the world. We are obsessed with finding technical solutions to political and social problems.
The source mentions things that sound like they're straight out of science fiction, like bionic spy flies.
And brain scanners at airports to detect terrorists. We think, how do we stop terrorism? We don't just think about diplomacy or economics or ideology. Our first instinct is to think, maybe we can invent a machine that smells fear, or maybe we can build a drone the size of a mosquito to spy on people. We believe that for every complex human problem, there is a gadget that can solve it.
Which leads us perfectly to the next section, the ideal of progress.
Yeah.
Because if knowledge is power, and if we can solve any problem with enough research and the right gadget, then we can fix the world, right? We can make it better.
This is the optimistic side of the coin. The pre-modern view was that the world was, as anything, deteriorating. The golden age was gone. The best you could hope for was to maintain the status quo. If there was a famine, it was God's will. If there was a plague, it was a punishment for sin.
And hubris was the greatest sin of all. The story of Icarus flying too close to the sun, the Tower of Babel, the message was always, stay in your lane, don't try to play God.
But the scientific revolution looks at that and says, no, let's play God. We can probably do it better. This new ideal of progress takes hold.
Let's look at poverty. This is a huge shift in thinking. Jesus is quoted as saying, the poor you will always have with you.
And for most of history, that was taken as a statement of fact. In the pre-modern world, Poverty was like gravity or bad weather. It was a prominent feature of the human condition. You could be charitable, you could give alms to the poor, but you couldn't solve poverty as a problem.
Not today.
Today, we view poverty as a technical problem. It's not a divine decree, it's a logistical failure.
Yeah.
It's a problem of resource distribution or a lack of good fertilizer or a lack of access to medicine and education.
The source makes a really useful distinction between social poverty and biological poverty.
Right. Social poverty is inequality. The fact that some people have way more opportunities and resources than others, that's a complex political and social problem, and maybe it is impossible to fully eradicate. But biological poverty, the actual lack of calories and basic shelter that leads to starvation and death,
We are winning that war. Decisively.
we are crushing it. In the last 200 years, we have pulled billions of people out of biological poverty. The source notes a statistic that is both miraculous and deeply weird. Today, in most countries around the world, you are far more likely to die from eating too much food than from eating too little.
We have literally traded the problem of starvation for the problem of obesity.
Which, historically speaking, is an unbelievable achievement. It's a miracle.
Or look at something like lightning.
A classic example. For thousands of years, what was lightning? It was the hammer of an angry god. Zeus, Thor, Yahweh. It was a mysterious, terrifying, and divine force.
And then Ben Franklin goes out and flies a kite in a storm.
In the 1750s, and he comes back and says, it's not divine anger, it's just electricity, it's a natural force. And then he does the next step, the Baconian step. He invents the lightning rod. This simple metal spike that you put on a roof basically says, I understand this power, and I can channel this godlike force harmlessly into the ground. He disarmed the gods.
So we've solved lightning. We are in the process of solving poverty. We've largely solved famine. But there was one thing left. The ultimate limit, which the book calls the Gilgamesh Project.
The defeat of death.
Before we get into the modern science of it, can you tell us a bit about Gilgamesh? Why is he the mascot for this project?
The Epic of Gilgamesh is one of the oldest stories we have, written down on clay tablets in ancient Sumer, Mesopotamia. Gilgamesh is a powerful king, a demigod, a hero. He's strong, he's rich, he's successful, but he's forced to confront reality when his best friend, Enkidu, dies.
It's a very visceral and disturbing scene in the myth.
It is. Gilgamesh refuses to bury his friend. He just sits by the body for days, weeping in denial. He watches until he sees a worm crawl out of his dead friend's nostril, and that horror breaks him. He has a profound realization, I'm gonna die too, this is my fate. I will become worm food.
So he decides he's not going to accept it. He's going to stop it.
He goes on a great quest for immortality. He travels to the ends of the earth, fights monsters, dives to the bottom of the ocean to find a magic plant. He tries everything to find the secret of eternal life.
And the outcome?
He fails. He returns home empty-handed, old and tired. And the moral of the story, the message that echoed through humanity for thousands of years was, death is inevitable. You are human. You will die. Your destiny is to die. So accept it. Make the most of the short time you have.
And most religions built their entire structure around this acceptance, right? You will die, but don't worry, there's an afterlife. You'll go to heaven, or you'll be reincarnated. They gave meaning to death because they couldn't stop it.
Exactly. But the scientific revolution, it reads the Epic of Gilgamesh and refuses to accept the moral of the story.
For a scientist, death isn't a destiny. It's a technical failure.
This is the crucial, radical reframing of the problem. Ask a doctor today. Why did this person die? They won't say it was their time. They won't say the angel of death came for them.
They'll give a technical reason. Cardiac arrest, massive hemorrhage, metastatic cancer.
And what are those things, really? They are mechanical failures. The heart is a pump. The pump stopped working. The artery is a pipe. The pipe got clogged. Cancer is a coding error in the DNA that leads to uncontrolled replication.
And if it's a technical problem, it must have a potential technical solution.
Exactly. If the pump stops, we can shock it back to life with a defibrillator. If the pipe clogs, we can clear it with a stent or replace it. If the code is bad, maybe we can edit it with CRISPR. The leading project of modern science, whether scientists admit it openly or not, is the Gilgamesh Project. We are trying to cure death.
We package it in more acceptable terms. We say we're curing cancer or curing Alzheimer's, but the end result of curing all fatal diseases is, well, you don't die.
We're aiming for what some call immortality. Not immortality, because you can still get hit by a truck or blown up in a war, but immortality means the absence of death from natural causes. You can live as long as you can keep fixing the biological machine.
It sounds like pure science fiction, but we forget how far we've already come. The source tells the story of King Edward III of England and his wife, Queen Eleanor.
This story is it's heartbreaking every time I read it. We're talking about the 13th century. These are the rulers of England. They are the wealthiest, most powerful people in the country. They have the best food, the best castles, the best doctors of their time. They are the 1%.
And yet, look at their family life.
They had 16 children. 16.
And the statistics on those kids are just brutal.
It's a graveyard. 10 of their 16 children died in childhood. That is a 62% mortality rate for the richest family in the kingdom. Only 6 of them lived past the age of 11. Only 3 lived past age 40.
Just try to imagine being Queen Eleanor. You are pregnant for most of your adult life, and on average, you are burying one of your children every 3 years.
The source asks us to imagine the psychological toll. Today, if a parent loses a child, it is a life-shattering tragedy. It defines you forever. We have support groups, therapy, grief counseling. Eleanor went through that 10 times.
And she was just expected to. Keep going. It was normal.
It was the human condition. In 17th century England, 150 out of every 1,000 newborns died in their first year, 15%. Today in the UK, it's closer to 5 out of 1,000. We have pushed death back into the shadows, especially the death of the young. We have nearly doubled our life expectancy in just a few centuries. We have already achieved miracles that would make Gilgamesh weep with envy.
And here's the cynical turn we have to take. None of this is free. None of it happens in a vacuum. We have these miracles, we have this knowledge, but who pays for it all?
Ah, yes. We have to talk about the sugar daddy of science.
We have this romantic image of the scientist, don't we? Galileo in his tower looking at the stars, Newton sitting under the apple tree, just pure, unadulterated curiosity.
And sure, that curiosity is a real motivator, but modern science is incredibly expensive.
It's not just one guy with a telescope anymore. It's the Large Hadron Collider. It's the James Webb Space Telescope. It's huge labs full of DNA sequencers.
You need millions, sometimes billions of dollars for a single project, and that money has to come from somewhere. The source describes a feedback loop that powers this whole enterprise.
Walk us through that loop.
Okay, it goes like this. Science creates new technologies, new capabilities. That power is then used by governments or corporations to gain resources. More money, more territory, more control. And a portion of those new resources are then reinvested back into science to create even more power.
But the loop doesn't spin itself. It needs an external push.
No. Science is not a self-sustaining moral enterprise happening in a vacuum. It needs a patron, a sugar daddy. And historically, the two biggest patrons, the two biggest forces pouring money into that loop, have been imperialism and capitalism.
Which means that science isn't neutral. The direction it goes is shaped by the people who sign the checks.
Exactly. The source uses the cow analogy to illustrate this perfectly. It's a really simple and clear example.
Right. The tale of two biologists.
So imagine we have 2 brilliant biologists. Let's call them Professor Slughorn and Professor Sprout. They both apply for a $1 million research grant.
Okay. Professor Slughorn's project is to study a disease that affects cow udders. It's not painful to the cow, it doesn't kill them, but it reduces their milk production by about 10%.
A purely economic problem.
And Professor Sprout.
Her project is to study bovine psychology. She has a hypothesis that cows suffer from depression and emotional distress when their calves are taken away from them at birth. She wants to understand their emotional lives.
Both are valid scientific questions. Both would use rigorous biological methods, observation, data analysis.
But who gets the $1 million?
The Slughorn, every single time. No question.
And why?
Because the dairy industry, the capitalist force in this story, is losing money on that 10% of milk. They have a direct financial incentive to fund Slughorn's research.
Right. And Sprout's research, it's not just neutral to the industry, it's actively dangerous. If she proves that cows get sad, that might lead to public outcry, new regulations, changes that would cost the industry money. So she gets nothing.
Unless
Unless she can game the system. Unless she's clever and rewrites her grant proposal to say something like, by understanding the neurochemistry of bovine depression, we can develop a new line of antidepressant medication for cattle, which will calm them and therefore increase milk production by 15%.
she has to hook her pure research to the profit motive.
Exactly. And this reveals the fundamental limitation of science. Science can tell us how to clone a cow, it can tell us how the udder produces milk, but it cannot tell us what we should do. It can't answer the question, is it more important to increase milk production or to reduce cow suffering?
It has no moral compass of its own.
None whatsoever. Science is the engine. It's a powerful V12 engine that can take you anywhere. But it doesn't have a steering wheel. The steering wheel is ideology.
And ideology is the thing that decides the destination.
Yes. Is it liberalism driving the car? Is it communism? Is it Nazism? Is it capitalism? The engine runs the same for all of them. The Nazis used the same principles of biology and chemistry as the Allies did, but they used that knowledge to build gas chambers, while the Allies used it to mass-produce penicillin.
So the lesson is that we can't just blindly trust science with a capital S. We have to look at who is holding the steering wheel and paying for the gas.
Precisely. We have to understand that the scientific revolution wasn't just about a search for truth. It was about an alliance, a powerful, world-changing alliance between science, empire, and capital. They fed each other, and together they conquered the world.
Which brings us to our closing thought for this deep dive.
Sure.
We've covered this massive 500-year arc. We started with the peasant and the sailor, the awakening to a completely new world. We talk about admitting ignorance, adopting mathematics, using that knowledge to gain power, and then using that power to try and solve age-old problems like poverty and death.
The Gilgamesh Project.
And the source leaves us with this really haunting observation about our modern ideologies.
It does. It points out that as we have become more scientific and as our power has grown, our traditional religious structures have weakened. And the modern ideologies that have replaced them, liberalism, socialism, feminism, they are all very focused on this life, on making life better here and now.
They don't really promise you 72 virgins in the afterlife or a place in a heavenly choir.
No. Liberalism doesn't have an opinion on what happens after you die. It just tells you that you should have the right to vote and express yourself while you're alive. But there is one major modern ideology that still clings to death as a central source of meaning.
Nationalism.
Nationalism is the only one left that offers a clear path to a kind of immortality. It says, you will die, but the nation lives on forever. You will die a hero for the fatherland. It promises that you will live on in the collective memory of your people, that your sacrifice gives meaning not just to your life, but to the life of the nation.
It's a very powerful hook. It's the last vestige of that old pre-scientific system where death gives life meaning.
But here's the provocation for you, the listener. We are actively, seriously pursuing the Gilgamesh Project. We are pouring billions of dollars into biotechnology, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, and AI, all with the explicit or implicit goal of radically extending human life, maybe indefinitely.
So what happens if we succeed? If science actually cures death, or at least pushes it back for centuries, what happens to nationalism? What happens to the meaning of sacrifice?
If you know you could live for 500 years or maybe 1,000, are you going to be willing to risk that life for a line on a map, for a flag?
And maybe deeper than that, if there is no heaven above and no glorious death to strive for, then we are forced to build our heaven right here on earth. That's the only game in town.
And you have to look around and ask yourself, are we building heaven, or are we just using all this incredible power to build a faster, louder, more crowded, and more anxious waiting room?
That is the question, isn't it? We have the power of gods, but do we have the wisdom?
The jury is still very much out on that one.
Thank you for diving deep with us today. This was a heavy one, but I think a really important one. We'll see you on the next dive.
See you then.